Hello, hello,
Hello.
and good evening. Mary, welcome. I'm so happy to have you on the podcast tonight. We were just chatting and I love the energy. I love that we're talking about a topic tonight to have people feeling good. And I can't wait to dive into it. But before we do, I just want to introduce Mary. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. She is a hypnotherapist and craniosacral therapist living in Louisville, Kentucky, with her husband Jim and dog Bailey. She's been in private practice for 20 years. She's worked with nonprofits involving the returning soldiers from Iraq and Afghanistan, as well as LinkUp, which was a nonprofit offering assistance to those who have dealt with clergy abuse and related trauma. Proud grandmother of two granddaughters, Jane and Middy, Mary enjoys travel, yoga, and teaching RISE Hypnotic Meditation. Welcome again, Mary.
Thank
Again,
you,
I'm
Kelly.
so happy to have you. That is such a beautiful bio. I love that you've put so much of your history and what you're about and your values in there. So people are automatically going to get from you that you've been living a life of service, and service to some populations that were probably really desperately in need. So, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Kelly. I really appreciate you inviting me on the show and getting to talk about Rise. Yeah.
Yes. So, I want to start. This is
hmm
so exciting. And I was telling you, I've been dabbling a little bit on your website, which is fantastic and so user friendly. So, I want to make sure in the show notes there's going to be a link to head over to the website so you can kind of play with some of the things that Mary already has there. But let's start with RISE Hypnotic Meditation. What does RISE stand for? I love an acronym.
It is an acronym. It stands for the four stages of the process of the hypnotic meditation. It is R is for relax, I is imagine, S is suggest, and E is for empower. So when I learned self hypnosis during my hypnosis training, I found it kind of convoluted and confusing. And when I would lie down to do it, I wasn't really sure what I was doing or if I was doing it correctly or if I was doing it in the right order. So when the pandemic happened and my one on one business closed, the craniosacral work and my table closed, I started thinking because I did still have service left in me. I still have things to teach, I have work to do, but I knew it was going to shift and change. So I started thinking about how I could teach self hypnosis in group. So I've been doing it one on one with my clients for a long time because sometimes I wouldn't see a client but once a month or once every 2 months, and they wanted to continue the work between sessions. So I was teaching this therapy for some time, although it wasn't called RISE. And then when the pandemic happened and I sat quietly at home alone and thinking about what was next, RISE came to me, and it really came to me. And it was like, oh, this makes it so simple. This is anyone can grab RISE and learn the four steps and do the work and shift their mindset, think more positively, but also increase more of what they'd like to have more of in their life, whether it's more
Mm,
patience or to run a little faster or to knock off the negative self talk, whatever people needed, that there were, it was a tool that they use. And so my clients were telling me they were using it for other things on their own besides what we had been working with. So I started realizing the depth of what it really could do. So for the last year, I've been traveling a little bit as I can and teaching it to different people. And I've just really been encouraged. And I love the work and I loved seeing people awaken and see some answers and see some things dissolve that they're ready to let go of in their life. So it's been a very rewarding next step for me. So
oh
it's
my
nice to
gosh.
know there's some life after, in the time of all this change. And so,
Yeah. Oh my
yeah.
gosh. I mean, I feel so much the same way you do when it was like, okay, now you're going to be home. And like the 2 weeks that they told us initially, I was like, well, this is going to be great. I'm like,
Right.
I've got
Yeah.
projects. I'm going to relax. I'm going to do all these things. And then it was like, and it's going to keep going.
Yeah.
And then we realized it was a marathon, not a race. And so it was, how do we pivot? How do we
Right.
continuously
Yeah.
reinvent ourselves based on what's happening now? So we talked a little bit about, RISE and how it's used. So what can it be used for? How can people take this as a practical tool?
Well, the way I do it is I do it every night at the end of the day. And so as I'm
Mm.
going to sleep at night, I'll just take a few breaths and relax my body. And I'll feel the blanket, and I'll think about the colors of the sheets and of the dark, cool room and of my dog next to me in her crate. And then I will just think about the day and process the day. And the good things I will make a little bit louder, and I will think about a little bit and really enjoy them again one more time, at the end of the day. And the things that didn't go so well, or the hiccups of the day, would give me time to reframe them. Well, maybe I acted that way today because fill in the blank. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
maybe I wasn't my most patient or my most present today because I was frustrated about this or that. And it kind of gave me a way to look at the day and to shift the energy. So I wasn't necessarily going to bed with a heaviness about me, or a regret, or guilt, or shame, things like that. And then also, I've used it also to bolster things. I'm not a speaker. I've been in my dark little room doing craniosacral therapy and hypnotherapy with people for 20 years. So I have not been a
Mm-hmm.
teacher. I have not been an author. I have not been a public speaker. So, but I am now.
You are
And
now,
I am
exactly.
now. So Rise has really helped me with that as well, to kind of, pull that part of me up and let that part of me shine a little bit more than it had in the past.
Yeah, I like this. And I like that you've broken it down into steps and kind of given it more of a framework because, I'm sure for so many people meditation is a fairly new experience like in the
Mm-hmm.
past 2 years. I had already been meditating myself, but then kind of went into more of a practice. But I had used meditation kind of as part of my day, part of my self-care. But then it became, this is a tool that can shift me out of being in these states of anxiety and fight or flight
Mm-hmm.
and kind of dealing with all of the emotions of the day and things shifting back and forth. And I can kind of relate to people who sit down in stillness and they're like, well, now what? So I think this is such a beautiful way to look at it, that you're kind of identifying each of the little steps. So maybe you can take us through like what that looks like to
Absolutely.
go through each of those little steps, cuz I loved that the first one was relax. I was like, if somebody had led with, okay, you're going to do this thing, it's called meditation, but don't worry about that. You're going to start with relax. I'd be like, well, that sounds amazing. Sign
Yeah.
me up.
Right. Well, relax is the first step. It is a body scan. You can do a progressive relaxation scan, but also going inward. When I first started learning meditation, I had the false impression that you want to go out of body. You want to go up into the ethos and the heavens, and that's where your answers were. And you grab that information and you bring it down. But
Mm-hmm.
body work and doing craniosacral therapy taught me that that's not how it is, that it's really inside of us, our DNA, our training, our imprints, our fears, our habits, and that's really what is fueling us. So
Mm.
R is you relax, and so go deeply into your body, even if it's thinking about your spine or your core. And you want to take deep breaths, and the breaths really help to shift the nervous system and bring everything down. So that usually takes 2 or 3 minutes. And then imagine is the step where you really want to bring your senses into the process. You want to use smell, taste, sights, sounds, colors, textures. So you want to create a really happy, safe place for you to do your work. I find nature very helpful in that for me. That's where I go to rejuvenate. So it's very easy for me to imagine a forest or a beautiful beach. And when I go to those places, create them in as much detail as possible. So you're really feeling the sand between your toes and the temperature of the sand as you wiggle them down wiggle your toes down into the sand. And you want to bring this place alive. And it really has a way of bringing you deeper inside of yourself. And then suggest is where you're moving the energy. You're shifting something. You're either shifting the way you feel about something, you're shifting a burden or a block that you have. And there's many different ways to do this. I teach a 3-hour workshop. RISE is a workshop. And so we go through these steps. And one is affirmation. So a lot of times we don't have the people around us to tell us what we need in the moment. And sometimes we need to just rely on ourselves and tell ourselves that we're doing the best we can. And that's good enough. And many other things. So affirmation is one way you can move the energy. Another way to use the energy, to move the energy, is using a metaphor. So you can imagine your block as a thing. So maybe your anger is a red hot ball of fire and flame. Or maybe your fear is a crystal bowl that's very fragile and that can break very easily. This is all very individualized to what works best for the person. But metaphor works well, visualizations work well, where you can imagine what you want to move and then move it that way. There's one scenario where you imagine a file cabinet and you open the drawer that is your files, the file of your life and your existence now. And all the red files, you don't need to name what they are or know what they are. All the red files represent that which you are done with. You don't need that energy anymore. It's not productive for you anymore. Possibly it was an imprint that you had picked up a long time ago, no longer serves you. And you just pull those red files out of the filing cabinet and shred them. You go back and you look at the files that are truly who you are and your most productive self. And so there's a lot of different ways to play with it. I really encourage people to find which one works the best for them. There's also contingent suggestion. So if I used to be this way in a certain, now I'm going to be that way. If I used to get very nervous when a certain person would walk in the room, now that I've shifted that energy, how am I going to be when they walk in the room? What's going to be different? How am I going to light up differently? How's my energy going to be different? How, when I shift an energy, people are going to react differently to me? And then the last one is regression, where you kind of go back to the original time of the imprint and shift it. And sometimes it's kind of like pulling the root out of something, So you're kind of going back to the original and seeing how it happened, how you picked up that imprint, why you had that fear or that particular habit. And then that gives you the ability to shift it. Well, maybe I picked that up because I was told that at a very vulnerable time. Maybe I always eat everything on my plate, even if it's way too much food, because at that moment in time when I was a child, I was told to clean up everything on my plate. And I've kept out my life, and I feel guilty if I don't, or whatever the scenario is. So it's kind of shifting the energy and giving yourself another way of looking at a situation or a challenge that you have in your life. And then the last step is E, which is empower, which is feeling the results of the work. So now you've just shifted something. What's going to replace that? I don't want to say whole, but whatever you've replaced, you want to replace it with something very productive and positive in your life. And then there's also the superhero pose, which, putting your hands, your fists on your hips and standing very tall and straight. There have been studies done by Harvard and Columbia University about how that really changes you physically. By standing in that pose for 2 minutes or 120 seconds, it does physically change your chemical balance in your body. It increases your testosterone and it decreases your cortisol. Sorry, other way around. Increases your cortisol. No, you're right. Increases testosterone.
No, you had it.
Increases your, okay, I'm questioning myself. So by doing these things, then you're really amplifying the shift that you've made.
Right. Oh my gosh. That's gorgeous. That's such a great process, and I'm thinking this makes it so much different than like the traditional idea or concept we might have of meditation where, we're just kind of sitting in stillness and what happens happens, but this process seems so much more, you're engaging in a process that you're actively shifting things. So what may have looked like a very passive activity now becomes one that's very active and helpful in progressing in the areas that you want to progress.
Well, what I noticed with my clients, our clients teach us, but my clients would come in and they would say, I've got this anger towards my sister that is ruining everything. I've got to get rid of it. My kids are walking all over me. I need to learn how to have boundaries. They would come in the door knowing what the energy was that they wanted to shift. Craniosacral therapy didn't always address it. But when I put it back on them, how do you want to change this energy? What would you rather do than be angry at your sister? How would you like to resolve that, to have more peace in your heart and have a better relationship? How that reflects all in your life. So I found that putting this tool in other people's hands really gave them the ability to shift things for themselves. And I think now with the pandemic, we really need to find ways to help ourselves and to work with ourselves, because we can't get to people as easily.
It's
so many businesses have closed.
Yes.
So many people have had to shift, lives and, be stay-at-home mothers and teaching mothers, instead of going out and working. And a lot of different things have changed.
Yeah. And I think that's such a great segue to you're a contributing author to volume 5 of the Ultimate Guide to Self-Healing.
That as well,
yeah,
I believe.
She's there behind you. Love it. So yeah, I'm with you that when I heard and that Laura DeFranco and connected with her, that she was doing these projects to bring the tools to people, to have people be able to invest in their own healing and change that paradigm, that thought like, I have to go to somebody for this. Physically, I need to go, versus I can become informed and educated, and I can learn, and I can become my own healer. And this has been we're almost at the 2-year mark of, that day that she was inspired with this idea. And, yours is volume 5. So I was in volume 4. And it's really very exciting to me. And this idea that we can become so empowered and capable of our own healing, and these tools don't have to be held in the hands of gurus and only sort of dribbled out to people as we can, but they're there and they're so easily accessed. So I think, for people like yourself who have taken, a topic and created a framework that's approachable and effective, we're really revolutionizing how people heal and, increasing or decreasing the amount of time that it takes.
I think so too. And ultimately it is in people's hands. There's hypnosis, but all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. I have to allow, we have to be ready. It can't be, someone saying we need to change, or you need to quit doing that, or, that doesn't, the shame and the guilt doesn't really change patterns and change habit or make us happy. And the other thing is our brain really wants us to be safe, not necessarily happy. So the decisions that our brain makes and our active way of responding to things is to keep us safe, not to keep us happy. So sometimes we have to override what our brain is telling us and say, no, I'm going to get up the courage and I'm going to do that, because if I could do that, that would make me really happy. And that's important to me.
Yeah.
And our brain will say, oh, no, just stay where you are. Just sit down, have another cup of coffee, stay right where you are. You're just fine.
It's so true. There is that little voice. Yeah.
Right.
She shows up and she's like, no, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yes, but we are.
Yeah.
I'm like, you were not driving. It's me. I'm in charge
here. That's right. And our mind will try to imprison us that way. It will try to control us and tell us, no, because it wants to keep us safe. It doesn't necessarily want us to live our best life. And,
Yeah.
we need both. We need to be safe too, but there are times where our mind just needs to sit in the corner and be quiet. Let us have an
Yeah.
adventure.
Yeah. And I think that too, that piece of becoming more embodied and more
Yes.
existing within our bodies and less in that mind space that tends to spin and be repetitive and hold all of that conditioning that we've picked up over this lifetime, potentially
Mm-hmm.
others, you know, getting into our bodies, using our senses, like you said. I think that's also such a huge, piece to it, that getting down into our bodies, the breathing, the calming. So many of us in these past couple of years have been just existing so much in that state of fight or flight. And like you, one of my priorities has been to support people in, no longer staying in that space of heightened anxiety all the time, because it just does such a number on our bodies.
Okay.
So I love how you included the Superman pose and, kind of reducing cortisol and having these means by which we can take control of that, you know. So, yeah, I think that's fantastic. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your book that's coming out mid-February?
Please. Yes, I'm very excited about it. It is the RISE book. So it is the class, but then on the back, it also has RISE for different things. There's suggestions for doing a session. So there's RISE for sleep, RISE for patience, RISE for athletic performance. And I think there's about 25 or 30 different suggestions where I suggest an R, an I, an S, and an E on how to do that. And these are just a place to get started. Again, I would really like this to be an individualized practice for people to bring in their own habit and their own tradition with this. So they pick their favorite place to do it. They pick their music. They pick all the conditions that they want around them to help support the work.
Mm. Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. And you said sleep, so my ears perked up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's a big
That's
one.
Yeah,
That's a
that's
big
one
one.
of my favorite
Sleep.
topics, and
Mm-hmm.
then so people who are struggling with sleep, so many times it's that busy brain that hits the pillow, and
Exactly.
it's either the repetitive thoughts, or it's creative people who have never had this kind of time at home to explore the things that they're excited about,
Mm-hmm.
and they just keep going a mile a minute and, try to stop and lay down and sleep, and it doesn't work. So this
Mm-hmm.
sounds like such a fantastic tool for that wind down time before trying to fall asleep. So I
Mm-hmm.
love that.
That's when I use it the most, but I've also used it honestly in the bathroom stall of a restaurant before. I have sat down and had had something come up in me during that dinner and went and just, calmed myself and went through the process and shifted that energy as well. So it also is a great emergency tool as well.
Mm. Oh, fantastic. Oh,
Because
that's
sometimes
great.
things surprise us sometimes. We do have these imprints and these habits, and sometimes we get, you know,
Triggered.
nudged. And thank you. And, you know, it's nice to really nip that in the bud. And so this is something that you can also do once you really train your mind and your body to do it in a very short amount of time.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So I'm guessing that with this book coming out, that there's going to be so many more ways that people can connect with you, participate in your work. So what are some of the things you have coming up, and what are the
Absolutely.
best ways for people to get linked up with you?
Well, probably the best way is through the website. It's www.risehypnoticmeditation.com. There are videos there that support the work, that say why it works, how it works, and then also some videos for different things. We're just getting started on that. There'll be new videos added weekly or bi-weekly. So we're going to keep building that library, but that's really to get people started in the process. There's also a list of the classes that I'm doing, and we're going to start doing more virtual classes as well. So if you have any questions about it, and then also the book will be out next month on Amazon, or we'll also advertise that on the website as well. So,
Oh my gosh.
just reach out,
That's
please. I'm here. If anybody would like any help, if they're feeling stuck with RISE at all, or you just like to know more about it, please reach out. I'd love to talk to anybody about it.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to ask you one more question. This is my
Okay.
new favorite question to ask guests because I love visioning. I love this idea of kind of forecasting for ourselves into the future. So, what do you think you yourself in December of 2022 is going to have accomplished and learned in this year?
I think I am going to learn to be a better public speaker. I'm getting more opportunity. I'm going to start presenting RISE at a few conferences. So I'm going to get the opportunity to speak more publicly about it. So I'm really hoping to improve my public speaking ability, and then also just to get RISE into people's hands. I feel like it is a very usable, adaptable, direct technique, and I hope that I can spread it to as many people as possible between now and December of 2022.
Oh, I love it. I love it and I agree with you. I hope we can get lots of people just learning these skills to be able to improve their lives and their interactions with other people. I'm so thrilled for you, Mary, and I
Thank
really
you,
can't wait for
Sally.
this book to come out. I'm definitely getting this one and flipping through the pages to find the best things for me. If you want to know more about Mary and how to connect with her, you can check everything out in the show notes. And we're really excited for you. And I hope you can come back on the show
Love to.
further on down the year and share some of your successes.
Absolutely. And maybe I can go through a session or so,
Oh my
do a
gosh,
guided session with the group. Love
that
to.
sounds like so much fun. We'll definitely do that. So
Great.
thank you, Mary. I wish you much
Thank
luck.
you, Kelly.
And thank you for joining us this evening. Have a great one,
Thank you
everybody.
all.
Bye
Bye.
bye.